We are just over a week away from the special election for the Alabama Senate seat vacated by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and President Trump is throwing his support behind candidate Roy Moore. Despite sexual assault allegations against the Republican, Trump tweeting, quote, "Democrats' refusal to give even one vote for massive tax cuts is why we need Republican Roy Moore to win in Alabama. We need his vote on stopping crime, illegal immigration, border wall, military, pro-life, VA judges, Second Amendment, and more. No to Jones, a Pelosi-Schumer puppet." All right, so what's next for the controversial candidate? Let's bring in our political panel. Richard Fowler is a radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor. Lawrence Jones is a radio talk show host and contributor to The Blaze. Gentlemen, welcome. I want to start with President Trump on this first. And Lawrence, I'll ask you. Anytime he weighs in on this issue in particular, it seems some voters at least are reminded of the accusations that came out against President Trump. Is it politically wise for him to get involved?
Well, I think both political parties have decided that they're just going to support their candidates because it's politically expedient. But I think when you're talking about Donald Trump's perspective, he's always said that the allegations against him weren't true. So I put him in that position with Judge Moore when you have Judge Moore saying they weren't true. Although right now I'm not sure I believe Judge Moore. I believe that due process should happen. But I think the president is coming from the perspective of a victim, he thinks.
Richard, I wonder if it just has more to do with he's coming from a place of just having scrounged and scraped for every single vote to try and get tax reform through, and then all the challenges that came with every vote that he's tried to mount before this. And that's all he's thinking about is numbers. Can you sell that?
I mean, it is a numbers game for the president. And to be real with you, Melissa, I do think that Roy Moore is going to win this race despite these allegations. And that has everything to do with the fact that I think Alabama Republicans have continued to stand by him for the past couple months. And I think they'll continue to do so. And it might just take him over the edge when we get into December. And then it becomes a ball game for the United States Senate. Will Mitch McConnell seat Roy Moore with all these allegations against him? Will they send him to ethics, or will they say we have another vote for Republicans, so it doesn't matter? And that is going to be the big question mark. But I do believe that next week we will have a Roy Moore senator, Senator Moore from Alabama.
Lawrence, do you think he's going to win? And what do you think happens?
Yeah, I think he's going to win, but, this is not just a Republican issue. What has happened is both political parties has decided that they left morality to the back of the bus a long time ago. I mean, we let Bill Clinton stay in office for years. Hang on. I don't want this to boil down to a place where we're arguing about who did what when or that sort of thing. It does seem like we are at a place where if you're working for a company and you're accused of this harassment, it's your boss's decision what happens to you. But with public figures, it's a little different in the sense that they were voted in by a group of people. So it's almost like if you stand up and you say, here, everybody throws everything they can at you, and whether you did it or not, if you're elected, you're elected. But Melissa, that's not why they're doing it. They're doing it because it's politically expedient, and both political parties want to protect their party and the votes.
Well, let's just be very clear here. I think there's a difference. I mean, sadly for the women who have come out against Roy Moore, there is no due process because a lot of these cases have passed a statute of limitations. So the due process comes by the Alabama voters going to the polls and voting. And what it looks like is going to happen on the ground there is that Roy Moore has a chance of winning. And I think the president, by campaigning in Pensacola, which is about 25 miles from the border of Alabama, has been very clear that he's going to support Roy Moore. He's going to double down on it. And sadly, these women won't get their justice, and the voters are going to vote for Roy Moore.
Same for Nancy Pelosi supporting her party.
I think there's a big difference here between the two, and I think that's what Melissa's trying to point out.
I'm not sure there's a big difference in the sense that you can, any sort of candidate comes forward, and once you know what you know about them, it's then up to the voters. And if they decide they want this representative in spite of what he's supposed to have done and how credible the witnesses are or the victims, all that kind of thing, if they decide they want him anyway, who is anyone to tell them they can't have him?
Well, I think that's the point, Melissa. And I think
correct.
To go further, the question becomes: is Mitch McConnell and members of the Republican caucus in the Senate has said that they won't seat him. So the question now becomes: after the Alabama senator, after Alabama vote for him, will this Senate seat him? And that's a Mitch McConnell
They don't
question.
have a right to unseat him.
Well,
the
no,
voters have a right to choose who they
ethics.
want.
Okay, Lawrence, how difficult, besides the right, it's very hard for them not to seat him. I mean, it's not just like we're going to decide yes or no. This is not something we've historically seen a lot of. Lawrence.
Right, exactly. It's a tough process, and not to mention you're going to tick off the voters that sent him there despite the allegations. Look, I'm not saying I agree with Roy Moore. I'm not saying I agree with any of these people that have been accused. But what I am saying that the American people have a right, the people of Alabama have a right to choose who they want to choose despite the allegations.
Yeah, I think we have to go, but I think what's similar is they're the employer in this case. The voters are the employer. So
Correct.
they get to decide the same way in the other case. It's the employer who decides, do I still want this person working at my office or not?
The one distinction here before we go is that the Senate does, because of the ethics committee, they have rules that all senators must abide by, and that's the question. Will Mitch McConnell send him to ethics, and will the ethics committee expel him from the United States Senate? And that's what we have to wait to see.
All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Not going to happen.
Thanks, Melissa.